What many don't know about Colon's administration of the island at this time in 1497 was that he wasn't even there. Colon had actually returned to Spain and arrived in Spain in June 11th, 1496. So as Bartolome was picking up the tribute from ANACAONA and Behechio, Colon wasn't even present. He didn't have any idea what was going on the island. But not only was Bartolome Colon gathering tribute from the indigenous people in Jaragua, or los Tainos de Jaragua, he was also dealing with rebellion in general among the men, the settlers, the Spanish settlers, who were still back in the Isabel. And this rebellious nature of all of these men followed the Colon brothers everywhere. This is an example of when Cristobal Colon had to fight Francisco Porras in Jamaica, pero en la Española in 1497. Bartolomé Colon was dealing with a character named Francisco Roldan. And Francisco Roldan felt that he had the right to cause chaos and do everything else. So he would demand things from Bartolomé Colon. When he figured out that Bartolomé was not going to betray his brother because he did ask him to join his rebellion, Roldan said, you know what, I need to get out of here. I'm heading to Jaragua. In Jaragua, Roldan was able to convince ANACAONA and Behechio to betray Bartolomé Colon and to stop paying tribute. He basically told them, you know what, I'm as big as a leader as they are. I'm a big cacique too. So you know what? You don't have to pay him anymore. I will make sure that this tribute system disappears. So they weaseled their way into the Taino political system, and eventually they became white caciques. Because Roldan wasn't by himself. We know that there were at least another 100 other settlers who participated in this rebellion. Francisco Roldan had been el alcalde mayor de la Isabel, and he had enough charm, charisma, and leadership skills to convince everybody else that eventually went with him that he was the better option. He was better than the Colon brothers. These rebels were eventually known as los Roldanistas. So Francisco Roldan and ANACAONA and Behechio became allies, and they allowed them to stay in Jaragua. And not only that, but to gain power. While in Jaragua, they adopted the CACICA tradition of being carried in litters. They did not want to touch the ground. They were that important. They loved Jaragua because they said que ahí las mujeres eran más hermosas y de más agradable trato. Bartolomé de las Casas and Oviedo speak about how Roldan just basically took over. He would steal the other Indians' wives, sisters, mothers. He would use them as waitresses, as laundry women, as cooks. Basically, he wanted to be taken care of, hand and foot. And Bartolomé writes, como si hubieran nacido de ilustres padres, haciendo fuerzas e importunas violencias donde quiera que estaban y andaban, matando y acuchillando fácilmente a cualesquiera tristes indios por cualquiera desabrimiento que ellos tuviesen. Some might ask themselves, why did ANACAONA and Behechio allow this? Why did they not get rid of only 100 people? What could explain it is that we know that Caunabo was imprisoned and then sent off to Spain, but he drowned on his way there in 1496. Legend says that Behechio, once he heard that his brother-in-law had perished, he went into a very deep depression. Depression so great that it killed him. Behechio's death resulted in a ceremony. As we know, the Tainos had their traditions in terms of their burial traditions, and ANACAONA fully participated in the burial of her brother. Oviedo records what supposedly happened, and it says that one of the traditions for the greater caciques was to be buried and to have one of their wives, at least one, buried alive with him. In the case of Behechio, it is written that supposedly 3 women were buried alive with him, including one of the most beautiful women at the time, and her name was Guatebenequen. And it says that she was renowned for her beauty, says Pedro Martí de Angleria. and she was buried alive with two other women and the corpse of the cacique by instructions of ANACAONA. Each person was given a pitcher of water and some casabe. And supposedly, there were two Franciscan monks or friars who witnessed this and heard her screams. There were areitos played, processions, and food. Lots and lots of food. Some say that this description was made just to discredit ANACAONA and make her seem cruel and unfeeling, because Guatebenequen was forced. She didn't go into the tomb willingly. Oviedo records that it was a tradition that these women would be buried alive, and they had a name. They were supposedly called Guatebenequen. He says that some did it willingly, that it wasn't always forced, but that this particular wife of Behechio was put in against her will.